The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this morning's Toolbox Talk. My name is Sean Frey, guys, and I'll be the organizer for this morning. Guys, as it is only a half an hour session, same as every morning, I am going to keep this short by simply saying at any point, guys, if you have any questions whatsoever, just go ahead, pop them in the questions tab. They come through to me. You will not disturb Chris. And then at the end of the webinar, we will go through and we will answer all of those questions. If it is a question on the service itself, I'll go ahead and answer it as soon as I get it, or as soon as I can. But if it is a question on the source material of this morning's webinar, I will leave it for the professionals. And then, guys, this morning we are going to ask for a show of hands from the audience. So if you guys do look on your interface, there is a hands up and hands down button. Now that is just for us to get a very quick yes or no response from you guys, and Chris will be asking for that. So if you guys could just keep an eye there on your interface and be ready for when he does ask that. Then what you do is you go ahead, you click it once, it comes through, it shows up on the system, and then once I'm done taking down the results, I will go ahead and drop everyone's hands for them. Other than that, guys, it is a normal Toolbox Talk, so I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Chris. Chris, are you there?
Yes, thank you very much, Sean. And thank you to all our attendees this morning for waking up early and joining us again for this Toolbox Talk, which is brought to you, as always, by FEM, as well as IOPSA, the Institute of Plumbing. Again, a huge thank you to our sponsors, as well as to SAOSH for accrediting this Toolbox Talk for 1 CPD point. So don't forget, if you're not a member, go ahead and register with SAOSH to get the value out of your CPD points, as well as to get additional benefits from them. And again, we just would like to say thank you for the hard work and dedication of our sponsors, FEM and IOPSA, to really try and make it a safer environment by bringing us awareness programs such as these. As always, it is presented by myself, Chris from OHSS Consulting. Many of you have been keeping in contact with me, and I really do appreciate that. There are still a few questions coming through that I need to get answers to. I am doing the research. Again, I just want to say that I'm trying to do the best research possible. I do have quite a few answers, but I'm just checking on the validity of this to make sure that when I do send you the emails with the answers, that I'm actually giving you the correct stuff. So really thank you very much for your patience. But again, thank you very much for the interactivity between us. And for this morning, I would really like to say a very big thank you to Adele Niemand. I've been chatting to her throughout the week. Some awesome information coming from her side. In fact, a lot of what you're going to see in the Toolbox Talk has been a back and forth between myself and Adele. She's really given me some good information on this, gone through the info, put it into a nice little Toolbox Talk for ourselves, and we'd like you to enjoy. But once again, a very big thank you to Adele for the amazing service that you are doing also to the safety community. And to everybody else who has emailed me and given us suggestions. At the end of this, we are also going to ask you if you'd like to listen to a specific topic next week so that we can see really what it is you would like to hear. This morning's Toolbox Talk is on employee responsibilities. So we are going to be touching base on Section 14 of the Occupational Health and Safety Act. And what we would like to say is we are going to show you the difference between Section 8 as well as Section 14. So you'll notice that we've put Section 8 as our heading for us just to remember this is the responsibility of the employer. But we are then going to show you what are the responsibilities from Section 14 of the Occupational Health and Safety Act. Now, many of us who are listening or attending this Toolbox Talk must be an employee. And as Sean mentioned earlier, we are going to ask you to please put your hand up. So go ahead and find that button on your console there. We would like to find out how many of you are employees and not employers. So please put your hand up if you are an employee. Since this Toolbox Talk is obviously based around the duties or responsibilities of employees, we just want to find out what the ratio is between employer and employees. We'll give you a few seconds, and then we're going to ask Sean just to give us that amount or that actual percentage of employees who are listening in today. Thank you, Sean.
All right, Chris, the hands are slowly still going up, but it does look like it has leveled out at about 53%.
Thank you very much, Sean. I really appreciate that. And to our attendees, obviously, if a few more hands are going up, perhaps you're still looking for the button. Let's cap that at about 60% then. So thank you very much for participating in this way. And perhaps you have additional ones that are sitting with you as well, other employees that are listening in. So thank you very much to all the employees, but as well as the employers. Please don't leave, don't log out. Take a listen, because we are going to look at the differences between yourselves as an employer, what your responsibilities are, but mainly focus on the responsibilities of employees. And all of you would know that the very first section of Section 14 in the Occupational Health and Safety Act states that you need to look after your health and safety as well as the health and safety of others. Now, if you look at that picture, you can maybe picture yourself there standing in and amongst your colleagues or friends or family members that you are working with, and you realize that you have a responsibility not just towards looking after your own health and safety, you also have a responsibility toward the person next to you, since all of us are affected by each other's works. And based on this, if you are in charge of people, the minute you become responsible, you are then in charge of those around you. You need to ensure the safest, healthiest workplace possible. Now, why do we say this? Well, every single employee has an opportunity to make the area around them not just safe, but healthy. So we want to remember that the area around us, every single person in that environment that can be affected either by what we are doing, what we are not doing, and even our own illnesses can be affected by that. So let us not just think of ourselves, we also need to think of others. And this responsibility is quite a big one. The legislation on liability or responsibility basically means responsible or answerable in law or legally obligated. Thus, each and every single one of us, including employers, are liable and responsible. In other words, we are legally obligated to follow this section of the Occupational Health and Safety Act. So yes, we understand that it may sound a bit negative to you, using the law to really try and push us to get us into a health and safety mind. But really, this is just the motivation behind it. We want to say we appreciate the law, we want to follow the law, much like any other law that South Africa gives us. But we want to tailor-make that law for ourselves. Now, how do we do that? Well, that is by being reasonable and practical. What does this mean? Well, having regard to the severity and scope of the hazards or risks concerned to our environment, the acceptable knowledge that is reasonably available concerning any task that we are performing, as well as the actual means of removing or making it safer, mitigating that hazard, and then the availability and suitability of a means to remove that hazard. What we want to encourage you to do is to say that you have the opportunity to not only have a minimum requirement or a minimum compliance to the law, you have the availability at your own disposal to have best practice or due diligence. In other words, a higher standard of health and safety. And really, it starts with our leaders. Many of us look to each other as employers, or obviously we look to our safety officer to keep us safe. Can you imagine that? We ask somebody else to keep us safe. Well, really, if you wanted to keep yourself safe, would you not look to yourselves as the first person responsible? Well, no doubt, we look to others for information, for guidance, and for leadership. But really, safety starts with each one of us. So, judging by the amount of employees that we have versus the amount of employers we have, we can see that both are interested in health and safety. In fact, it's not just starting with an employee. We have many employers joining us this morning, showing the commitment on behalf of employers, in fact, on behalf of employers in most industries that are interested in our health and safety. What do they need from us as employees? They need our cooperation. Now, Section 8 of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, and don't let this confuse you, that's why I said in the beginning, the law on employees is taken from Section 14. But I'd like to see the employees and the law versus employers and the law. So, employees, we are going to focus on Section 14 now and what is required of you. But please always keep in mind that Section 8 of the OSH Act also encourages the employer to play a part. Now, just to touch base on one of the first things an employer is responsible for is to ensure that the environment that employees are working in is safe and without risk to their health and safety, as well as their well-being, whether it be mental, emotional, as physical as well, to ensure that that person is very healthy, very engaged in their work from a safety aspect. But notice exactly what the first part of Section 14 states for you as employees: to take reasonable care for the health and safety of himself and of other persons who may be affected by his acts or omissions. So really, these two things work as a cooperative encouragement for health and safety within an organization. Section 8.1 stating that an employer must provide a safe working environment, and then Section 14.1 stating that an employee should add to that safe working environment by taking care of that safe working environment, either of himself or of those around him. So really, there is no differentiation between what an employer is supposed to do and what an employee is supposed to do. Our responsibility towards safety is the same: to take the initiative, to have safety in our hands, and to uplift the standard of safety within our organization. The second thing that the law requires of you as an employee, as regards any duty or requirement that is imposed on his employer or any other person by this act, you need to cooperate with that person. What this means in layman's terms is, if the law states that your employer is supposed to add a supervisor, add a manager, or any competent person in order to supervise you, you are to cooperate with that person to ensure that health and safety is complied with. So what does this mean? It means that across the board, we need to have a good relationship, not just with our co-workers as employees or our peers, but we need to have a good and safe working relationship with those of upper management, including our employer, but not neglecting any person in the company, since every single person, whether on the ground performing the work, whether in management, supervisor level, or even upper director and owner of the company, all have an equal responsibility to be respected and also to be cooperated with. But that means that it goes both ways. It is a two-way communication. We all need to look after the health and safety of each other. The third thing for an employee to do is to carry out any lawful order given to them, as well as obey health and safety rules and procedures laid down by your employer or anyone authorized by the employer in the interest of health and safety. Now, many of us walk past that entrance hall of our companies where the safety policy is displayed. Many of us look at that policy and we see the big bold letters stating occupational health or occupational health and safety and environmental risk management policy, whatever policy it is that you have up there. But how often have we actually stopped to read it? Do you know what those rules and procedures that are laid down actually are? Or do we just see the word policy? Do we just see the word SHEK or SHIRK or HSE and then think that is safety? Well, yes, that is the title of safety, but we want to get to the substance. It's really like going into a restaurant, opening up the menu, reading all of the beautiful dishes that's on that menu, and then not eating anything, and walking out saying, I have now been satisfied. Well, I don't think any single one of you would be able to do that. You see, just looking at the titles makes you want to enjoy the food. And this is the same attitude that we should have toward our safety policies, procedures, or any manual that is in the interest of health and safety. Look at what the subject is, and then make sure you try and digest that information. Read through the policy, understand what it is saying. What is it required of you to perform? But at the same time, remember that those policies and procedures are there to protect you. So just as that food in the restaurant is there to sustain you, by reading it and eating it, you are benefiting yourself. It is the same with the policies and procedures set out in your company as well as those set out in legislation. All of it is actually designed to protect you. It is something personal. We don't want any of you to be injured or hurt during your course of work throughout the week. In fact, we want all of you to be healthy and safe and to get home to your families. And that is the encouragement that every single employer wants for you as well. And that is why we can see that the law, Section 14 of the OSH Act for employees, works just as well, or in fact, together with Section 8, the duty of the employer. So again, the second final thing that we actually look at in the law, again looking at Section 14 for all of you employees, if any situation is unsafe or unhealthy comes to your attention, we ask you to please, in fact, the law states that you must, as soon as possible, report that situation to your employer or your health and safety representative. The reason why we want to do this is to ensure that the environment we are working in is as safe as possible, not just for ourselves, but for every single person that is affected. And if we see something that is unsafe or unhealthy, we just need to report it. Please remember that your responsibility ends there. You can, let's say you see something spilled and you realize someone can get injured by slipping on that spill. Well, there are two things you can do. One, you can obey the law of Section 14 by just reasonably and practically going to report that situation and telling them it is unsafe. But there is a second thing that you can do, and this is where due diligence, best practice, and a higher standard of safety comes in. You can actually clean that spill. Imagine that. You could actually make it safer. Many of us prefer not to. Many of us prefer just to walk past the unsafe situation, and just tell somebody else about it to make them responsible for fixing it. But remember, that unsafe situation affects you as well. And you are responsible for that unsafe situation because it can affect someone else. So keep this in mind next time you do see it. In fact, we'd like to ask you, do you know who your health and safety representative is in your department? Well, go ahead. Let them tell you who they are, what their responsibilities are in terms of Section 17 and 18 of the OSH Act. And know who your occupational health and safety representative is. Keep those clear lines of communications open so that you can encourage them and they can encourage you. Remember, we want to do this in a spirit of cooperation within an organization. And as employees, we can play a very, very important role in the encouragement of health and safety in the company. Now, the last thing that an employee must do, and again, you can see the correlation or the communication between Section 14, employees and the law, as well as Section 8, the duties of the employer. If you are involved in any incident which may affect your health and safety, or which may have caused harm or injury to yourself, you must report this incident to the employer or anyone authorized, or to your health and safety rep. And then in the bold it says when, as soon as practical, but not later than the end of a particular shift. Now the reason for this is obviously on the legislative side. If you do get injured and you do not report it, there is no proof that it was a work-related injury, and thus compensation for occupational injuries or diseases will not pay out. In other words, you are not going to get the deserved medical treatment that you need. So what we encourage you to do is, as soon as there is an incident, a slip or a trip, a fall, anything that has affected your health and safety, even if it is a near miss, please report this as soon as possible or by the end of the shift, depending on the severity of that incident, to your health and safety rep, your manager, or anybody authorized by your employer, or even the employer himself, depending on the size of your company. And if you do this, you are following the lines of communication for an open-ended discussion and clear lines of communication for health and safety. This will ensure that should you be injured, you do get the medical treatment you deserve from being injured. So that is all on the Section 14, the duties of the employee, as well as Section 8, and how we can see that clear barrier between the two of them, ensuring that both are upholding their law. Section 8, dealing with the duties of the employer, as well as Section 14, dealing with the duties of the employees, and how these two actually work together. So really, we encourage you all to make sure that your health and safety is at a high standard. Now, here are some things that you should remember, both as employees as well as employers. The liability is to ensure that every person takes the steps to control as well as comply with the requirements of legislation. Whether it be Section 14, your duties as an employee, or Section 8, your duties as an employer. Then also to remember your risk assessment and hazard identification. It is there to protect you, to inform you of the dangers, the hazards, and the risks that are associated with that workplace. Remember, don't just look at it as a menu. Make sure you digest the actual contents. Understand what the risk assessment says for you, and then put it into practice so that you can stay safe when working. Information, communication, very, very important. This is the only way to establish the correct measures for control. Being aware of any hazards through this communication, your risk assessor, your SHE-rep, your employer, as well as all employees will be on the same page. And this is really what we are looking for. Do not allow any work that is dangerous. As an employee and an employer, you are allowed to do this. Do not permit anyone to continue with a task unless those precautionary measures have been taken. Ensure you've been trained and that you've got competent supervision. Looking on the other side, making sure you have consultation. Speak to the correct people. Incident reporting. Make sure that you encourage workers to report observations. And then make sure that you, as an employee or an employer, abide by the legislation set out for occupational health and safety. So really, this is a positive note. We look at the legislation and we say, well, all of us are responsible. But you have the opportunity to proactively cooperate with occupational health and safety. React when incidents arise. Ensure that you are compliant. Look out for your coworker. Make sure you're following those health and safety policies and procedures. We can only follow these if we know what they are. So as that little slogan says, safety at work is everyone's business. Just remember, it is yours too. So use the occupational health and safety items given to you. Ensure that you are compliant and take advantage of any health and safety training sessions that your company might have. On that little slogan in the right-hand box, you will notice the very last thing saying that we need to take the initiative. In other words, every single one of us, from employer to employee, should be the one who takes the first step towards health and safety. And you can do that as well. Remembering a little while ago we had this, you are responsible for safety. Keep in mind that everything we've discussed up to now are minimum requirements in accordance with the Occupational Health and Safety Act. But on behalf of FEM, IOPSA, SAOSH, as well as myself and OHSS Consulting, and I'm sure all of you who are listening here, move toward continual improvement. In other words, look for a higher standard of health and safety. And you can do this by using visual felt leadership. Visual felt leadership is a system that is in place where every single person takes the lead for health and safety. Remember, we want to lead by example. If we start safely, those around us will be not only noticing it, but they will be affected by it. And what we are hoping to achieve is that the behavior or the idea of health and safety really becomes first on everybody's minds. So health and safety starts with you. In other words, if you want to do it, you will do it. Don't wait for somebody else to make the area safe for you. If you need it, or if you see a need, fill a need. If you see a problem, try to fix that problem. Remember, if you start safe and you work safe, you will finish safe. So always look for areas to improve. Remember, you as employees have a responsibility, but you also have an opportunity to increase health and safety. So be aware of this throughout the week. We hope you have a safe week, and we look forward to seeing all of you next week when we have another Toolbox Talk based on a different subject. And we are hoping that all of you have a healthy and safe week so that no incidents or accidents occur throughout your tasks. But as always, we have a Did You Know section. This is a reminder because of the importance of a risk assessment. We just want to remind you on what a risk assessment is. The term risk assessment is a very open to interpretation because it causes a lot of uncertainty. It is intended to allow you some flexibility. So a risk assessment does not necessarily have to be overcomplicated, but it must be suitable as well as sufficient. That is what is required by law. But now we ask, what are the terms suitable and sufficient? Well, these two terms are not defined, but in order to have a better understanding, we need to have a look at what the dictionary says. Suitable states that it is suitable for the desired purpose. In other words, it is meant for or adapted for a specific occasion or use. It is appropriate for the condition or occasion. That is what suitable stands for. In other words, we need to know our environment. Sufficient means of a quantity that can fulfill a need, but without being abundant. So again, it doesn't have to be overcomplicated. It just needs to be sufficient. All employees should have a training needs analysis done to determine what their company needs. And this goes a long way in ensuring that your risk assessment or your entire risk management procedure is being instituted in the company. So thank you very much. We hope you all are performing your risk assessments, whether it be your issue or task-based, or even your continuous-based risk assessments, your DSTRs, your job hazard analysis, or even your job observations. And we encourage all of you to please continue with your safety program, and let's reach for a higher standard. Now, next week, we have another Toolbox Talk, again brought to you by our sponsors, FEM and IOPSA, and we would like to ask you to please vote on what you would like to hear. We have had some suggestions coming through, and we had a question on diesel and how to work with diesel safely in the environment, as well as mental illness. And what is mental illness and how can we prevent it, help those who are mentally ill, or even prevent it from happening? So we'd like you now to please just type it in. If you'd like to make it simple for you, you can type 1 for diesel or 2 for mental illness, and then we can just tally those votes and see what it is we want to discuss next week. For those of you who have no questions, you may log off now. We thank you very much for joining us. I am going to hand it over back to Sean, who will take you out to the rest of this Toolbox Talk and just to end it off, but I will hang on the line for any questions that come through. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Over to you, Sean.
Perfect, Chris. We do have a couple questions here. The first question reads, a female does a toolbox talk and she is delivering it to her peers. The workers refuse to listen to the safety rep because she is a female and their culture does not allow it. What action can be taken because the supervisor doesn't believe in toolbox talks?
Okay, this is actually a very important question. Thank you very much to those of you who asked it. And this really comes back to the behavior that we have towards health and safety. For one, I can just mention that when an accident happens, an accident is not bias. When somebody gets injured, accidents are not looking just for men. Accidents are not looking just for women. They are not looking for just black or just white. Accidents happen to everyone. In other words, health and safety then is the responsibility of everyone. There is no culture, no religion, no politics when it comes to health and safety. The law is there for everyone, regardless of your background. And please remember, we are trying to move toward a rainbow nation. And if you've ever looked at a rainbow, I don't know if you've ever seen that there are no colors other than what is in that rainbow, but there are also no male and female. It is all equal. So if we can reach for that equality within the workplace, remembering where the information comes from is from legislation, not from the person delivering that toolbox talk. So we encourage all of you women in the health and safety industry to keep pushing at health and safety. We really appreciate all the hard work and dedication you're putting in. And for those of you who feel that a toolbox talk is not necessary, please go back into your legislation and take a look at Section 8.2E as well as Section 8.2I. Toolbox Talks falls as instruction and training within the occupational health and safety sector. It has now become a widely, commonly used form of instruction and training. In fact, it has become mandatory on most construction sites. Thus, we all need to encourage Toolbox Talks or safety discussions every single week. This is part of a health and safety program. Thank you, Sean. Sean, did we lose you there?
Hi, Chris. Sorry about that. The second question reads, how much authority does a safety officer have? Can you challenge him if he's being unreasonable?
100%. Definitely a safety officer is responsible for the health and safety on any site or in any organization. But please remember that the law requires you to be reasonable as well as practical. Now, the only way that you can challenge someone's decision is by ensuring that you understand the law yourself, not only the minimum requirements, but also what is set out in the client safety specification. So if it is stated in the specification that you must have X, then you must have it since you accepted that specification. But if it is in accordance with the law, on many things, safety officers tend to go above the law, which is actually a good thing. Please don't get me wrong. It is a good thing. We want to have a higher standard of health and safety. But when it does become unreasonable, you do have legislation on your side to state that you can go according to what legislation requires of you. Thanks, Sean.
Perfect, Chris. That is the last question for this morning. Do you want to go ahead and end off?
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you once again to Adele. We really appreciate all the information that you gave us for this Toolbox Talk. And we look forward to next week. Sean, you can just tell us which one I'm preparing for, whether it be diesel or mental illness. Thank you.
No, perfect, Chris. I will let you know that later today. At the moment, it does look like mental illness, but I'll have to go back and just make entirely sure in the report later. And then, guys, I did get a question from the audience, but I do apologize. I did misplace your question, so I could not answer it in the questions tab. The question was, are the CPD points awarded recognized by the SAC PCMP? I am not sure about that. I have taken down your email. If you're the one that asked the question, I have taken down the email and I will get back to you on that. So thanks so much, guys, for joining us this morning. I am going to go ahead and end off the webinar now. I hope to see everyone again, same time next week. Bye-bye and enjoy.